Well, thank you all very much, and it's a huge pleasure for me to be here. And I want to thank my wife too. She's saved my life. So I've had some successes and I've had some failures, but this is actually the best thing that's happened to me. So I want you to give Cindy a I was going to start with a couple vignettes and then just tell a few stories perhaps, rather than go through a long dossier. You can probably read that on your own. But anyway, I did graduate in '75 actually, but just to tell you how things were then, gasoline was 44 cents a gallon. The federal debt was $542 billion. It's now 19 trillion. Gerald Ford was our president, and as a result of being here, we did get to meet him, and he had 2 assassination attempts in 1 year, so it was kind of a rough year for him. The Brits chose their first woman leader, Maggie Thatcher. So it was a big deal in '75 when a woman rose to the head of the empire. New York City went bankrupt. Do you want to remember that? Now the whole country's bankrupt. There used to be news when something went bankrupt. That was big news there. The world population was 4 billion. Now it's 7. Marriage, most men married at around 23, women at 21. Today it's 28 and 26. So everybody's marrying later. Those that are over 40 that have never been married when I graduated were 5 and 6%, men and women. Now it's 20 and 14%. 20% of the people over 40 never married. Things have changed. A lot of people are living at home. Mostly men are living at home. Women are living at home at about the same rate that they did in '75. Men have doubled their home, so kick them out now. So The Godfather Part 2 won the Emmy, and Stevie Wonder, who still around, won a Grammy for Album of the Year. Elizabeth was the Queen of England, and today Elizabeth is the Queen of England. So at least some things never change. So anyway, a lot has changed, and lots have changed, particularly for you students over that period. As I said, I'm one of the luckiest guys ever. And I get to reflect on that today. Pardon me. So, actually I have some humor in this. It's not going to be this somber the whole time. My mom was a Swedish immigrant. So she came over when she was 5. They moved into the Englewood neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. That's where we lived for some period of time. Rough place. She was brilliant. She was a chess player, and I never beat her, ever one time. As a matter of fact, when she was about to die in 1999, she was in hospice care, and just for the hell of it, I said, "Mom, you want to play a game of chess?" She said, "No." So she retired 1,000-0 against me or something like that. So bless her heart. She was abused by her father, and I didn't find that out until much later. It caused her to be bipolar, which was hard on us as kids. Bipolar parents are tough to live with. I'm not trying to tell a sad story. I just wanted to emphasize I am a lucky guy. I came out of some crazy stuff. And her father probably abused her, and he was not alive when I grew up. And there was a story circulating that he had fallen in a hole next to a railroad track and broke his neck. My view is that my grandmother and my mother killed him. I think that's what really happened. I can't prove that, but I think there's something bad happened there. My father was first generation. He came from Eastern European Jewish stock, Latvia and Russia, and they were really good people. He was a scrappy guy. We were just looking. Cindy is gone. Have you gone to Ancestry.com? Has anybody done that? It's really kind of cool. So Cindy pulled up a bunch of stuff on the family recently, and for my grandfather, the employment says he was self-employed. This was 1930 is what it was. it says he was employed as a cigar store owner. Well, he wasn't, well, he did have a cigar store, but it really was a bookie joint, is what it really was. And so he was a scrappy guy. He made money, as he could, and very hardworking, tough guy. But my father was a World War II hero. He was a hump pilot. He flew from Burma to China. You probably don't know what that was. It was a famous air mission to help supply the Chinese. When he came back, he didn't talk much about that. He died when I was 16 years old. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't wish that day that I had spent with him. And so I know, just love your parents is all I can say. That's good advice. You might not have them around very long, so just make sure you love them when you can. We moved to Calumet City. I went to TF North High School. We had 485 graduates in our high school. Less than 50 went to college. And there was no way I was going to go to college. My dad said before he died when I was 16, he said, look, this is some advice for you about what you should do, things that I did not do. And what he said was, which is really a good thing, get a profession. Make sure that you can do something that people will value. So I said, what profession? I didn't know what he meant. What is a profession? Well, auto mechanic, carpenter, electrician, whatever. And I said, well, what about college? And he said, yeah, you might learn something there. So he didn't really know much about college, but he thought maybe that would be okay. And he also said something that I don't think we talk about much anymore, but it rang true to me. He said, do something good for your country if you can. And he was clearly a John Kennedy Democrat. And for those of you that remember the great speech that John Kennedy made on his first inauguration, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And my father really believed that. And he believed that we should all think that way, that we should think about what we can do for each other and for our country and our families too. But he was really strong on that, and that impression stayed with me the rest of my life. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we go through a little bit. Anyhow, I wasn't going to go to college because nobody in my high school really did at the time. And then I ran into this guy was a guidance counselor at our college. We called him the Count. We weren't very deferential to our faculty members or administration at my high school, but the Count was a big German guy named Bruno Basie. And of course, Basie, Count Basie, we thought was kind of cute. And one day the Count came to me and said, and another fellow, one of my friends, and said, we're going to go take the SAT test. And I said, what SAT test? I don't know what you're talking about. I said, well, you got to take an SAT test to go to college. You're going to apply to college. And we didn't have the SAT test at TF North because not enough kids were there to take the test. So he carted us off one Saturday to another rival high school, and we sat in a room with nobody we knew, and we took the SAT test. And I did reasonably well on the SAT test. As it turned out, I had 790 in math and 440 in verbal. All right, now, later on I realized that the way the SAT works is that if you know 4-letter words, you score in the 400s. If you know 5-letter words, you score in the 500s. So you can tell where kind of I came out. But I was really, and it took me a very long time, and this place taught me English. It taught me how, and grammar, and syntax, and to speak, and to put a complete sentence together, which sometimes I still struggle with, but this place taught me how to do that, because in those days, as it is today, Augustana was a place where mostly first-generation kids went, mostly kids like me who had parents that didn't go to college, mostly kids who didn't know what college was, what it really was or what it could do for you, and it helped you. Move along through there. Anyway, this is the only college I applied to and the only college I got in. So I was the only one I got in. And I think they accepted me because I was a legacy. My scores were pretty good, so they accepted me that way. And I got here and I said, wow, this is really a great place. No one's trying to beat you up every day. This is really cool. Wow. so I got here, and Stephen tells a true story. A friend of mine and I did ride our bikes from Chicago to here. My mother was really not all that capable of sort of handling the whole situation, so I just got on the bike. I didn't know what to do. I brought back a knapsack. What he did not tell you is that a week before we were going to take the trip, my friend did not have a 10-speed bike. And so what's left out of it, and I hope it continues to be left out of it, is we stole his bike. All right, so we Southside Chicago. So anyhow, that was pretty easy actually, not too bad. But lest you think that all worked out, 2 weeks after I came to Augustana College and I had my bike here, it got stolen. So the turnaround on justice was really, really fast on that deal. It was a nice bike too. It was a nice bike. Anyway, I thought this is a really great place, and you get kind of caught up in college, and I was really trying to study. I was completely ill prepared for the experience here, and I was really challenged here, and I was having fun too. Don't get me wrong. But right before midterms, I got mono, and for those of you that have been around, remember Carlson Hall had an infirmary in it. If those of you that are old Augie alumni, it was the basement of the infirmary. So I go down there, and the nurse says, "You need to walk up to the hospital." Is it St. Margaret's? Is that what it was? What was the hospital up here?
St. Anthony's.
St. Anthony's. And so I walked up to St. Anthony's, got a blood test, confirmed mono, got in the bed and just slept. And I slept basically through my midterm exams for the first quarter. And the dean at the time, we won't say who he is, you may know him, but the dean at the time came to my infirmary room, and I'd been a steel worker, so in this whole time frame, high school, I worked for U.S. Steel, I was a union laborer, and that kind of thing. So he came into my room and he said, "Murry, I've talked to your professors, and we've just decided that you're really not college material, and you should go home, and you should go back to work at U.S. Steel." That was the best thing that ever happened to me while I was here, because I got out of that bed, I went to every one of my professors, "Can I take my midterms?" They said yes, every single one of them. So he had lied about that. He hadn't really talked to everybody. And because they were, in those days there were more applicants than there were seats, and so it was a little bit different story. And I ended up doing okay on my midterms, and then I ended up getting a geology degree, and then went on from there. So I got hooked up on geology. Richard Anderson, who has passed, was a huge influence on me. Very gentle man. You all know him. And he taught me how to be a geologist. Great guy. Went to Illinois. And I'll tell you, as soon as I got there, I got a fellowship there. While I was here, I had a girlfriend. She got pregnant. We got married, so we had a child. We had no money. And Illinois offered a fellowship. I went, and that eased sort of the financial burden for a minute. But I will tell you, when I got there, I got mad at Augustana College. I really did, because I felt that going to Illinois, I was ill-prepared. Technically, ill-prepared compared to the other students that were there. And that was true. We didn't offer the kinds of courses that a university might have offered and all that sort of stuff. And so I was mad at Augustana for a while. I thought, gosh, I'm really not prepared for this. Nonetheless, I was able to get a job at Shell after that, but it took me 20 years to come back, and I'll explain that in a little minute. So I graduated at 25, I came to the board in 96, roughly. So I was gone for a long, long time. But I came back, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. I went to Shell. It was a great company, and I know it's fashionable these days to pan large companies, but it was one of the world's great companies at the time. It was a very tough place, but it was always also an extraordinarily innovative place. And the culture of it, the culture of it suited what Augustana allowed me to think about. So it was so tough. I remember I had a boss one time, and I was working on a project, and he had been very familiar with this project for a long period of time, and so I was supposed to try to think up something that he had not thought of before. And so I would show him an idea, and he would think about it and come in my office and scream at me about how stupid I was. And I'd come up with this dumb idea. And then I'd say, Bob, just take a pill, man. I'll think of something else. And so I did it over and over and over again. And finally, I thought of something that he didn't think of, and he was pretty proud of me. But that doesn't happen today, that kind of really tough, kind of interaction. And in the long run, it made me sort of a better person. I was able to, partly because of what you learned at Augustana, just sort of bob and weave with it a little bit. I wasn't rigid about it. I mean, this place teaches you to be flexible in the face of diverse culture, diverse opinions, and that sort of thing. And so Augustana helped me deal with that fellow. It was also an extremely innovative place. I'll tell you a funny story. There was a fellow there named Bob Dunham. Some of the geologists might know who he is, a world-famous geologist. And this is how good that culture was. Bob, he had written a bunch of books, but he got a little squirrely near the end of his career. And one day, he came into the office and he told the management of Shell that he no longer had a 24-hour biological clock, that his biological clock was 22 hours. And so he asked the management that if he came to work on Monday at 8 a.m., if he could come to work the next day at 6 a.m., and then the following day at 4 a.m. And then he did that repeatedly. I don't know what possessed him to think that he had a 22-hour biological clock. But to Shell's great credit, because we fostered innovation so much, they said okay. And so again, that was what I was used to at Augustana, was the ability to sort of spread your wings and be able to talk about things and do things that weren't very rigid. And again, I was still a little mad about, I wasn't technically prepared, but I'm starting to think, wow, there's some things I learned at Augustana that had nothing to do with what was in a textbook, right? It was this sort of relationship capability and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, I went there for a while, got to do a lot of very interesting things. And in that, while I was there, I wondered, and others too did, is why can't our country be energy independent? And Shell encouraged that sort of thinking. Why couldn't we be? Why were we prisoners to the rest of the world for very important energy resources? And most Americans, unfortunately, don't realize how sensitive that matter is. We fought a lot of wars over it. We made us and our children very vulnerable by ignoring that energy independence issue. And I always thought, why can't we do it? And that stuck in my head from the very first moment that I was at Shell and was a geologist, and thinking, why can't we figure something out that no one else has figured out? And that mission, that sort of guiding principle, if you will, sort of guided me through the rest of my career. And without going into a lot of detail, when I got to EQT, we started to think about shale, and could you get gas out of shale, and what would it really mean? And we took huge bets, made a lot of bad decisions, invested a lot of money, and ultimately we were one of the few companies that sort of figured that out. And for all practical purposes, the country now, and it wasn't us, we were a small piece of it, but the country, along with a lot of other people, John's companies, et cetera, all kind of at the same time figured out something that was pretty important for the country. And now we've got enough time to figure out alternatives. We'll have a lot of time to perfect those over the next 100 years or so, because that's how much we've got. But that mission always really was guiding. And I thought back to my time at Augustana then too, and thought, mission-centered. My father, do something for the country. And those kinds of things stuck with me through my entire working life. Now, so what about Augie? As I said, I left for 20 years, and because I thought I was technically unprepared, but came back. And I think if I had to sum up what it is that made me come back, it is that those issues that caused me to have some success as a leader, And you know, success, by the way, I know this topic for this talk was success. I think success is a body of work. I have plenty of time to screw up success before I die. So it's a full body of work. You know, you have to sort of, you have to integrate over the curve, right, for the whole thing. But it had little to do with the technical aspects of what I learned. It had much more to do with the soft issues, the leadership issues, the communication issues, the collaboration issues, the acceptance of diverse points of view, the willingness to be wrong, the willingness to ask for help and not be embarrassed to ask for help. Those are the things ultimately that I think you all get from this place, and those are the things ultimately that I think can guide you more than what you learned in a textbook or what you got out of a particular class. Not to say that the people here aren't spectacular. They're the ones that are helping you, you know, sort of discover these, you call them soft side or social sides or whatever, because Lord knows I didn't have much of that. Now, one of the things that when U.S. News and World Report wrote a paper about Augustana College in the early 2000s, a reporter called and said, why does Augustana College have 2 Fortune 500 CEOs? And at the time, Brenda Barnes, who I know you know, and gave a talk here, and just delightful, one of my favorite people ever, great gal, terrific business person, and by the way, a classmate, same class as me, oddly enough. But she and I were interviewed, and it turned out that the reporter made an analysis and said that the Ivy League schools had lost their grip on the C-suite in corporate America, and that in fact, liberal arts colleges, like Augustana College, were getting a lot more of the C-suite, CFO, CIO, CEO, that sort of thing, and wrote a paper on it. We have an article here on it, and they called us all up and they talked to us a little bit. And so the person said to me, why do you think Augustana College why are they preparing people for business better than apparently some of these Ivy Leagues were? And at the time, some of you may know, there was a company called Enron, and it had a dramatic failure. Jeff Skilling is in jail now, but he basically didn't have very good core principles. He was Ivy League educated. And so what I said was, if an Augustana graduate had run Enron, they would have not had the problems that they had. And I believe that. That's the kind of stuff that you learn here that you're not going to get anywhere else. And so that's why I love this place. That's why you should love this place. You may or may not take a 20-year hiatus after you graduate. I mean, by the way, they're going to ask you for money whether you're here or not, so so that's going to happen right away. But I encourage you to reflect as you can and as you're able to do over your postgraduate time, to think about the things that this place gives you that really very few others do. So God bless you.
What was it in the corporate culture at Enron that led to this kind of self-destruction and greed versus EQT, which helped solve our nation's energy dilemma?
Well, we were only a part of that, so
right.
a bit of it is humility, I think.
Right.
I think if you hung around with those people, and the mission, it was always unclear what the mission was. You know, it wasn't a healthy mission necessarily. It was a profit mission. There's nothing wrong with profit. I am a capitalist. But to have profit as an exclusive mission is not good. I mean, the mission should be centered around something that's, at least I think, has the potential to help people, and in particular help the country. I mean, we need a lot of people thinking about the country right now, you know, and helping it. And that was lacking in their C-suite. And the hubris, I mean, they had a lot of really smart people working for them. But just as other countries over the years have had smart people, they can be misdirected. And the leadership is in charge of assuring that the direction stays mission-centered and stays principle-centered, rejects opportunities that are counter to the mission, and accept those that are, and not drift, for convenience sake or for profit's sake or something like that. And my own view is, and I knew those people very well. I knew all of them, all the ones that went to jail. I knew all of them. They lack that in a palpable way. I mean, if that person was in this room today and gave a speech, if Jeff Skilling gave a speech, you'd say, you know what? He wouldn't make it at Augustana College. He might get good grades, but he'd be rejected by the culture here, and I think rightly so. You never want to see somebody go to jail, but in his case, I didn't feel too badly about it. Yes, sir, John.
Murry, you might make a couple comments about the down cycles that we lived through and the recoveries that we saw. Because we've got some students here today that are considering industry options in the geosciences. And when I was here was during a down cycle, and my future mother-in-law told me not to major in geology, and by the time I got my master's degree, I had 4 nice job offers.
Well, I think in general, the energy field, however defined, alternatives, oil and gas, whatever, I think is just a spectacular field. I mean, and I'll speak to your question directly in a moment. I don't want to avoid your question, but just to broaden it out, I think, the vulnerabilities that the lack of energy causes are profound. And as a matter of fact, Winston Churchill, during World War I, he distrusted Shell and Exxon so badly that he created British Petroleum just to make sure that the fleet had enough oil to run. It was a very smart move. And during that was right after World War I, and during World War II, arguably, the reason the country won that was because of its energy resources. I mean, this country exported oil and steel during World War II. Now we import both. So there's the manufacturing base and the means to fire it with energy is really at the core of why civilizations or countries succeed. And those that haven't succeeded have failed on those 2 scores. Now, to your question, John, we have had a lot of ups and downs. Fortunately, the downs that we have now are not intractable. What's happening in the energy business right now, in the energy world right now, Saudi Arabia's decided that they're tired of supporting the bad social policies of a lot of countries, Venezuela among them, Iran, Russia, Algeria, even Mexico to some extent, although Mexico's a little bit better, Brazil. And they said, we're just going to it's going to be a food fight. We're going to produce as much as we can. We're going to see where the price goes in the world, and the winners win, the losers lose. It's a very bold move. They have $1 trillion, or they had $1 trillion in sovereign wealth fund to fund their own programs. They've burned through about $250 billion of it already with this move. So it's a very painful, very bold move. John, to your point, they think, and I think, that the innovation capability in this country is sufficient that we will be able to, even maybe at lower prices, be successful here. And I think we've just touched the surface on all of these energy sources, whether it's shale, wind, solar, nuke, hydrogen. And I'm hopeful that just as our generation brought us to energy sufficiency, that the next generation will take us one step further and be able to do that. And it's going to be through hard work, a lot of technology, and that sort of thing. But I am absolutely confident that we will be able to do that. Prices are going to come and go, but I think at the end of the day, we'll survive in whatever environment that we have. And I've lived through a few. You've lived through a couple more than I have. but anyway, Lee.
Murry, how would you describe your leadership style and why did it lead to your success?
I went to EQT. One of the board members asked me that question before they hired me, and I said that my style varied somewhere between Mother Teresa and Attila the Hun. on any given day, and I think in retrospect I didn't lie about that. Looking back on it, it's hard. Lee, it's a great question. What motivates people is a very difficult thing to do, a very difficult thing to think about. And as hard as it is, you have to get out of your own skin on this, and that's very hard to do, particularly C-level officers and presidents, I might add, who, because so many people tell us that we're so good all the time, we tend to actually think that we might be good, you know? So you have to kind of get out of that, and some people, like this fellow Bob Smith that used to torment me every day when I was working for him as a geologist, he knew I needed that. And that was a good leadership style for me. And it caused me to do better. I don't know how he knew that. He didn't go to Augustana College, but I don't know how he knew that, but he knew it. And some people just can't exist under that kind of an environment. But I think it's different strokes for different folks. And I don't think one size fits all. And for those of us that are leaders, we can't presume that the leadership style that we like for us is a leadership style that will work for those that we lead. And I think we have to have a broad range in our ability to do it. And now if you miscalculate, you can hurt somebody, right? But I think the damage done by that is less than the damage done by a Pavlovized leadership approach. I just never really bought into that. So sometimes I was tough, sometimes I was soft. I can cry, as you can tell. I can do that. You know, I know how to do that. So, yes, ma'am.
I graduated about the same time you did, and from a different college, and worked for Johnson & Johnson then, which also was a company very driven by mission.
Yeah.
I'm curious now, though. I mean, at that time, people went to a place like that, and they worked there their whole career, and that's not how it is now. What do you think the relationship is between employees and corporations now?
That's a good question. I think, first of all, I don't think corporations are evil. I don't. I think, I get to sit on some boards of some magnificent corporations, but I think some have lost their way. I think your former company has, my former company has. I don't know why. I think I don't think you can paint it with a broad brush. I think it's very idiosyncratic. It has to. In the case of Shell, I know what happened. In the case of Shell, they lost the ability to grant Bob Dunham the ability to follow his own biological clock. Well, the Brits took over. I gotta say, the Brits took. So the reason I left Shell. I'll tell you the story why I left Shell. The reason I left Shell was I was in London doing a job, and this Brit tells me, and they were very frozen columns, and so he says to me, the problem with you Americans, you can't get your work done in 40 hours a week. You're not smart enough. You're not smart enough. We here can get that done. I said, what do you know? You lost an empire. And that was the end of that was a career limiting move right there. What do you know? So they kind of Shell had run its own thing. We had very innovative people, and then we were minority owned by Royal Dutch. And then they bought us all, and they tried to fit us all in these little cookie cutters, and we rejected it, and all left. Matter of fact, when I got to EQT, the Financial Times called me 2 weeks after I took the job. This reporter from the Financial Times called me and said, "What's wrong with Shell? People say you know." And I said, "You have the wrong number." I'm not going down that road. He says, "You know," but it's true. They crushed the culture of it because at the formation, it was an innovative, crazy. I mean, there were brilliant wackos at that company, and sort of herding that group together. I mean, they invented stuff that you can't even think about. All signal processing, geophysical stuff. It was a magnificent place. And then it all became kind of crummy. I don't know what happened at J&J, but I think it's idiosyncratic. I think companies fail because they lose mission, they get too focused on quarterly profits or something like that, and they forget what their founders tried to make out of them. And so, and it happened. The sclerosis can happen in any big company, but it doesn't happen in all of them. I can assure you. I mean, BlackRock is, I'm on the board. There's a magnificent company, and extremely diverse, worldwide, and the innovation of it is just spectacular. Halliburton's like that too. Halliburton's amazing company. So I think it's idiosyncratic, and I wouldn't shy away if I was a student of going to work for a good company. But I would ask, what's your mission? What are you trying to do? How are you trying to help people? What are you doing for the country? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, great.
Yes, sir.
So what do you know that we don't know? Because those images of those companies are not good in the general public.
No, BlackRock, well, no, I think, Halliburton has had, look, the media is, is crushed.
What do you know that we don't know?
I know the people. I mean,
Why
that's,
don't we get that?
you're a media guy. You're the media guy. I don't know why. I mean, I don't.
Good doesn't sell.
Huh?
Good doesn't sell.
I think that's right. I was going to bring this up in my talk. I'm glad you brought it up. I think one of the things at Augustana that I hope we continue to emphasize here is measure people by what they do and not what they say. And be systematic in your analysis, and don't have an ideological view of how you think something should turn out. Talk to people, ask people, find out. I did a lot of that before I joined the Halliburton board, and I said, geez, these are absolutely magnificent technologists, and they're doing great things. So I got very comfortable with it. But I think we tend, this is a 5-minute. Did you see in the Wall Street Journal the other day that the average attention span of a human being, did you see that? Yeah. Has fallen from 12 seconds to 9 seconds, or 8 seconds, which is shorter than the average attention span of a goldfish, which they calculate as 9 seconds. So now our attention span has fallen below that of a goldfish. So I think when you're working in minute sound bites, I think it's very difficult to put together a picture sometimes, particularly with the amount of data that we're being bombarded by these days. So you come to conclusions on 8 seconds of information and then kind of move on from there.
Murry,
question? Yes, sir.
let's talk a little bit about the social interaction that we think is in danger of falling apart because of all the texting and all of the Twitter, Facebook stuff. I mean,
gosh, that's way out.
the communication between coworkers is extremely important.
Yeah.
And face-to-face stuff works.
Yeah, I think, we're going to ride this tide of technology, and it's just going to, we're going to have to get on it or get off it or whatever. But I think this is my own opinion about this, that there's something in looking someone in the eye when you're talking to them, particularly if you're trying to make a decision, to see the body language of their conviction. Very rarely did I see somebody who's trying to lie to me about data. I mean, that just didn't happen. I mean, if it did, we got rid of those people. But I think there's a lot to learn from somebody's interaction. And I think trust is still by and large built not by texting, but by face-to-face interaction. And I believe in my heart that the social media and such is a means to a certain communication end that's comfortable, particularly when you're young, but that at some point our young people will appreciate or come to appreciate more the face-to-face interaction. And I don't think we should presume that they're not going to do that. I have great faith that they will at some point. At least I do. Maybe you all don't. I don't know. It looks like maybe some of you don't. No, I have faith in that. Yes, sir.
Murry, you and I have had an email exchange over the last month about the mission of Augustana College.
Yes.
What type of students we ought to be recruiting, because we have so many board members and administrative team members. Would you describe some of that in terms of your view of the mission and our pride in the students we recruit?
I will, and thank you for asking the question, and this is just my opinion, so there are many opinions on the board, and there should be many opinions, and these matters are being debated, and we'll kind of decide this. I in this case believe, and I don't think it's because this was my experience, I think it's because this is what I think we should do, that the mission that the college had when I came here, which was to take first generation or second generation kids and sort of move them up and give them those skills that could be lacking either because of where they grew up or they're immigrants or whatever. I mean, we're not going to have Swedish Lutherans. I mean, it's going to be there are going to be a lot more colors, in the student body, a lot more sort of economic circumstances, perhaps, but my view is that the mission should stay pretty true to that. I think we're a college that's equipped, and I think the board is certainly supportive of a mission where we take kids to from families where maybe nobody went to college, or maybe one person went to college, and take them to that next level. And I don't think we should feel badly if their children go to Harvard or Yale. I mean, I hope they come back to Augustana, but maybe it's the first step. And I know the issues we're dealing with is discounting and all the rest of that sort of stuff, but I think in general, the mission, I think, at least what I like is the fact that we take these magnificent kids and bring them, you know, we close a gap, or I don't know how you want to call it, but we extend their capabilities, let's put it that way, beyond what other schools would even care to do, let alone do. But we care to do it here, and we've always cared to do it here, either because we'd written it down or not. And we always had that in our genetics, and I think that's really a powerful thing. That's why Cindy and I are back here, you know. So we really appreciate that mission. It's a different mission, you know. We're not trying to be U.S. News and World Report #1. You know, we're not going to be Amherst. It's just not going to happen, you know. So anyway, thank you all very much. I appreciate it.